The political left has never understood that if you give the government enough power to create social justice, you have given it enough power to create despotism. Millions of people around the world have paid with their lives for overlooking that very simple fact. Welcome to Keith Knight, Don't Tread on Anyone, and the Libertarian Institute. Today I'm joined by Ashton Birdie, the excellent YouTuber. Ashton, where's the best place to find your YouTube and Instagram?
I am Ashton Birdie on both YouTube and Instagram. It is spelled ASHTONBIRDIE.
All right, and Ashton is a former Trump supporter and currently an anarcho-capitalist. So her and I are going to go over each of our top 5 reasons why we are anarcho-capitalists. Ashton, what is your first reason for why you are an anarcho-capitalist?
Oh my gosh, first of all, I want to make it very clear. I'm not an anarcho-capitalist, but I'm also not an anarcho-communist. I do not believe in this whole anarcho-something. Either you're an anarchist and don't believe in government, or you're a statist. Like there really is no anarcho-capitalist, anarcho-communist, anarcho whatever. I feel like there's anarcho everything at this point. If you're just not a statist, then you're an anarchist. That's all you really need to be. And the idea that anything anarcho something along the lines of government interference exists is absolutely psychotic to me. It cannot exist in any form. If you're an anarchist, you're an anarchist. You're against the state having anything to do with your livelihood. So yes, I am simply just an anarchist. Let me get very clear. And I would say my first reason to be an anarchist is just looking at all the corruption and the lies the government has taken place in, whether it be with every single war, which we're now looking at right now, what's happening in Afghanistan, their involvement with large corporations to help take down small business, what's happening with the NSA. The NSA is watching us right now as we speak, just everything going on with the US and the governments all over the world. This is why I'm now an anarchist, especially as someone who was, going through that small period of my life supporting Donald Trump for 2-3 years. I want to say even just 2 years. Just watching that happen and watching him send missiles into Syria every single year, refusing to pardon Assange, refusing to pardon Snowbrick and Ross Ulbricht, and breaking every single one of his campaign promises, and looking around and seeing that he still somehow had a base that believed that he was somehow playing some form of 8D chess, really made me realize just how able politics is willing to build cult-like mindsets, and why I had to get out of there as soon as possible. So I guess being an anarchist really revolves around the fact that I don't trust the government, and I feel like when you put any sort of sense into the government, thinking someone within the government, like QAnon or something, thinking that some miraculous person like Donald Trump is going to come riding on a white horse and save us all, like I feel like that's really like what was my first step. Like, okay, this is a cult. I need to get out of this. And I guess I need to be more independent and take care of myself because the government's not going to help me.
Got it. Yeah. Well, one of the first things for me was in, I think it was 2014. I was going to Grand Canyon University, and I was unfortunately held up in a terrible part of town. Mm-hmm. And then, my friend and I are like, oh, what do we do? This is horrible. And then, I don't know why, but I called the police and reported it because that was me at 18, thinking that they had something to do with helping people recover stolen property. So the cops get there and they start viciously interrogating me. What were you doing over there? Come on, you were smoking pot, admit it. And then they would just like circle in and out, and they're like, well, let me see your ID.
Well,
so
Grand Canyon University is in Phoenix, right? Phoenix is like one of those places where it's like you're in a good area 1 second, and the next area you're in a bad area, like almost instantly. It's the same thing as San Francisco. So yeah, I'm sorry, continue. But yeah, it's pretty interesting that cops just assume that you're up to no good.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, probably 80% of the people there have drugs on them. In like this area was on Broadway and the 101 for anyone who knows that area. So yeah, you're exactly right. It's like, hold on to your gun as we drive through this because we're stopping at a red light. And others, it's like, oh my God, I want to start a family here. This is gorgeous, gorgeous area.
San Francisco is the exact, all of the Bay Area. I'm Bay Area born and raised, and it's like that everywhere. But it's interesting you mention that, because I would say my second reason for not supporting the government is also the police, because when I was attending UC Berkeley and I was documenting all of the riots and the protests when I was out there, I remember finding a small group of people really latching on to them. I actually met up with Lauren Southern, Luke Radowski, and Tim Pool, and they were out there. And I remember, like, Luke and I were the only people who were like, anyone else notice the police aren't doing anything? Anyone else notice we're watching people get their heads bashed in with bike locks and the police are sitting there? They've got their batons out. They've got their shields in front of them. They've got helmets. And it's like, I'd watch this all go down, people like bashing each other and trying to kill each other in the middle of the street. The cops aren't doing anything. And as I'm watching the cops just stand there, I'm watching people walk by in Trump hats go, thank you for your service. What service? What are they doing? They're just standing there watching. And the worst part is that people can say, well, to be fair, the mayor told the police to stand down. And that's the exact point, is that police are not here to do servitude for you. They are here to follow orders of the very government that is trying to control you. They are the foot soldiers for the government. The police are not here to protect you. They are here to listen to the government.
Excellent point. Yeah. I mean, if they're here to serve us, every time I tell them to do something, they take it as a threat and then start interrogating me. Like the worst customer service ever for a service, that they brag about having. For me, it was just, them trying to interrogate me. I said, guys, we've been at this for hours. Could I just get my license back? It's 1 a.m. I got to go home. And they said, no, we'll let you know when we're done. And he wouldn't give me my license back. So I can't get in my car without my license in front of the cops. They're just going to pull me over and then they'll actually get what they wanted. So as I'm, back at my dorm room, I was just thinking, we have to chip in for taxes, but in return, we get protection. So if we don't pay, it's okay to send us to jail.
Yeah, but what protection?
Because it's sort of like an exchange. So it's sort of like a social contract where there's two sides. However, if they don't protect us, that mean government goes to jail? Does that mean the cops go to jail? Does that mean I don't have to chip in anymore in property taxes? Is this really a contract? So it was refuting the myth of social contract theory, just right in front of you. And of course, when they don't protect you, Pearl Harbor, 9/11, when crime goes up, the government gets more power. Not only do they not like, hey, we're so sorry, we want to thank all the taxpayers, we feel terrible. It's the opposite. So because of that non-existent social contract was one of the first things that was just like, yeah, I'm going to have to get out of this minarchism thing.
What's so interesting to me, what people don't really want to talk about, is the fact that we are paying these taxes and we're not actually told where they're going. And one of my biggest things, I think, because before I was a MAGA chick, believe it or not, I was actually an anarchist before I became a MAGA chick. So I remember being in high school and thinking to myself, one of the most profound things I learned was actually from my personal finance teacher, who was basically explaining to us what taxes were, what a mortgage was, a lot of things that most kids don't get to learn. And I remember thinking to myself, my parents' taxes are going to my education right now. My taxes are going to a lot of these things. How come I don't get a say in this? If I were attending a private school, do my parents still pay taxes? If the police aren't here to help me, am I still paying taxes? We won't actually talk about where a lot of these taxes are going. I'm also from California. We have some of the worst infrastructure, especially in the Bay Area, especially, down south in LA. I'm not seeing what my taxes are doing. One of the greatest movies I think is a perfect example of this is, what's it called? You Can't Take It With You. And the IRS show up at this guy's house. It's like a really old movie from like the 1930s or 40s. You really need to check it out. The IRS show up at the guy's building. They say, excuse me, sir, are you aware you owe this much amount of money in taxes? And it's great. This guy just looks at me and he goes, well, what am I getting for it? If I go into a store and I pay for something, I can take it right off the shelf and I own that thing. I can look at it. I know what I paid for. What are my taxes paying for? And they listed a bunch of things and he's like, well, I'm not seeing that around here. I'm not seeing the cops do this and whatnot. It's a really great movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch the movie. You Can't Take It With You. It's a really great film about just this old man who basically just defies government. He's got people making fireworks in his basement. It's the greatest thing I think I've ever seen in my entire life. But he's got a point. If I personally cannot see what my taxes are paying for, if I'm not writing out a check for exactly what I know I'm paying for, why am I paying for it? If I can personally own a gun to protect myself, which, in California, I technically can't. I can actually own a gun in several other states that I reside in, but I can't own a gun in California. If I own a gun, I have the ability to protect myself. If I am more likely to shoot someone trying to hurt me or take down someone trying to hurt me, and it takes the cops an hour to get to my house to help me, then what am I paying taxes for? I'd rather just pay the money for a gun.
Exactly. Your money's already going to guns that end up in the hands of the Taliban. Can't I get one of those guns, please, for myself and my protection from Gavin Newsom and his thugs?
$600 billion. By the way, that's another point to why I'm an anarchist now. $600 billion per year. That's just the layer of it, right? That's just the beginning of it. $600 billion per year goes to our military budget for wars that we knew we weren't going to win. Everybody's talking about Afghanistan right now. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, Joe Biden is so anti-war. He's our anti-war president for taking us out of Afghanistan. Yeah, okay, then why was Joe Biden pushing us into Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, and was actually trying to push his own money to make a profit off the poppy seed farming in Afghanistan that he's taking us out of now? Oh, I know. And also, if Joe Biden truly is an anti-war president, why are we still in the other Middle Eastern countries? Why are we still getting involved there? The war isn't over. We're still there. Just because we pulled out of Afghanistan doesn't mean we're not in the rest of the Middle East. And people want to forget that. They don't want to think about that. All the people in the, I don't want to say the left. I don't believe in the left or the right. But all of these people who like want to praise Joe Biden because they hate Trump so much are like, oh my gosh, Joe Biden's so great. He's anti-war. And it's like, Joe Biden is one of the reasons we're in the middle of this war. And the Trump people are not off guard either, because people keep forgetting that Trump paid an $8 billion arms deal to the the Saudi Arabians. And it's just like every single president you see in history has catered to war in some way. So Joe Biden taking us out of Afghanistan doesn't change the fact that we're still in the rest of the Middle East, and he could easily bring our military here on our own shores to tell us what to do, to push martial law, especially what's going on right now, where people in Australia are being forced to take vaccinations, aren't being allowed to go outside. There's mandates like no other. And I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Biden looks at that and thinks, that's a great idea. We'll get people vaccinated in no time over here if we just bring our military back home.
Exactly, yeah. As much as I'm like, end the wars, not only are they immoral, they're counterproductive. This is how empires fail.
Well, they're purposely done to cause more debt. They're
exactly.
purposely enforced to. Everybody wants to talk about oil. Oh my gosh, we're over there stealing their oil. First of all, no, we made oil business deals with the enemy. Nobody thinks about that. So these are supposedly terrorists over there who, started 9/11 and whatnot. That's the whole reason we're over there or whatever. If they're our enemies, then why are we doing business deals with them with oil? We didn't go over there and just start drilling into the ground and taking their oil from them. We had business deals with them. We had business deals over oil, over weapons, and to top it all off, what we don't want to talk about is how as soon as we got in the middle of there, poppy seed farming sprung back up again. And who do you think is profiting off all of that opium? Big Pharma. Who is the biggest projector right now with the vaccinations, with opium, with any drug being pushed into anyone is Big Pharma.
Yeah, and they no longer have we're there because of Al-Qaeda, because ever since Operation Timber Sycamore, they've sided with Al-Qaeda in Syria to fight Assad, they sided with Al-Qaeda in Libya to fight Gaddafi, and they sided with Al-Qaeda in Yemen, along with the Saudi regime against the Houthi government. So you don't really get to say. There's even an email from Jake Sullivan, the current foreign policy advisor to Biden, saying, hey, remind Hillary we're on AQ's side in Syria. This is just widely, General Michael Flynn, this is why he got railroaded, because he went on, I believe it was Al Jazeera, and he was just like, unfortunately, we saw the rise of ISIS as a result of the people the jihadis we sided with in I guess it would have been Syria instead of Libya at this time. So yeah, I mean that excuse is so ridiculous.
And people also want to forget that the countries that we're not in, a lot of the militaries of those countries are actually proxies for our own military. And we have people on the inside of each one of these militaries giving us information in exchange for other information, allowing poppy seed growth. I'm really stuck on the whole poppy seed growth and the poppy seed farming, just because of the amount of information we got out of farmers, the amount of torture camps that were built around those poppy seed farms, and the fact that we profit so much on the drug war every single day. This isn't just about bombing, countries in the Middle East, which is a very horrible thing. This is to top it all off the fact that this is about a war on information and the war on drugs as a means of controlling our own people here at home. And on top of that, we have the NSA watching us as we speak as a result of these wars, because they want to make sure we're secure.
Yeah, right. Just like the abusive boyfriend who takes your phone every 5 minutes to read your text. He's just keeping you safe. How ridiculous is that? Foreign Affairs just yesterday said, what we could learn from the 9/11 war on terror to combat right-wing extremism. That was just yesterday. I mean, everything you give the government the power to do against your quote enemy is going to be used against you in like almost no time. Do you have any comments on that? And what's your next reason that you're an anarchist?
Well, I think my main comment on that is the fact that even though we are pulling out of Afghanistan, I do the little like bunny quotes for a reason. I do want to say this, that anytime a politician or a form of government does anything you think is right, there is always something else going on over here. So everyone's watching Afghanistan right now. Everyone's watching the Taliban. Everyone's watching the Middle East. Start paying attention to what's going on in DC, because the magician looks at like, oh, look over here, look over here. He doesn't want you looking over here. So pay attention to DC, pay attention to what's going on our shores right now. Because if you're too focused on the Taliban, if you're too focused on the Middle East, you are forgetting the whole reason, everything going on over here. So pay attention to DC, because anytime a politician does something you think is good, anytime he tries to do something that can benefit you and benefit your ideas, chances are something big is going to happen. Something big and dangerous to your freedom is going to happen fairly soon.
Definitely. Next reason you're an anarchist.
Next reason I'm an anarchist. Well, let's see. I already said something about the cops. I mentioned the drug war quite a bit. I mentioned the wars. I mentioned the public. I mean, I've really gone to the public school system. I guess the public school system is my next bet. And now indoctrination through public school systems. I mean, I attended UC Berkeley. I went to a public high school. And I just remember my time at public high school. I just was crazy. I mean, you would not recognize me now. I had blue hair. I was in a punk rock band. I played the drums. I was a full-blown anarchist back then. I really just got into things. I remember I used to skip school just to like go down to San Diego and protest SeaWorld, and I used to start protests at my high school over the craziest things. I remember one day our principal, and she really hated me, she did an announcement over the intercom, and she says, you need to start dressing more to all the girls in the school, basically. This is not a beach. And she was making comments about the girls wearing short shorts and tank tops. This is not a beach. And that comment stuck in my head. I'm like, guys, how funny would it be if we turned our school into a beach the next day? Next thing I know, someone hears me say that. They put like a Facebook group page on Facebook. They invite everybody who's in the school to the Facebook group page. My name is plastered all over this Facebook group page that I did not make. And everyone's like, we're going to show up to school tomorrow. We're going to dress in like sun shorts. We're going to dress in swimming suits. We're going to bring lawn chairs. We're going to bring beach balls. We're going to bring towels. Next thing I know, the entire like lawn is just covered in beach towels and beach balls and lawn chairs. And people are putting like bikini tops over their shirts. It was hilarious. Don't get me wrong. But I made one comment. And next thing I know, everyone's having this riot dressed in beachwear. And I'm getting detention because I made one comment. And I remember there was this other day where I just remember thinking to myself, how much you want to bet me money that I can start clapping right now and get everybody in the school to start clapping along with me? So me and my friends, we got together, we started cheering for no apparent reason. Next thing you know, we got a group over here who's cheering because they think it's someone's birthday or something. We got a group over here that's cheering. Next thing you know, the entire quad is clapping their hands and cheering, and they have no idea. They just think, oh, someone's birthday or something. Someone got asked to prom or something. Nobody has no idea why they're clapping, but they're all clapping. Next thing you know, I'm in detention because somehow that's a fire hazard, and because everybody clapping as a result of me clapping can somehow silence the fire alarms, and no one's going to hear the fire alarms. That's more detention for me. I must have spent so much after school detention. And here's the thing, I wasn't a bad kid. I got great grades. I got straight A's. I got into good colleges out of high school. I never drank. I never smoked. I never did drugs. I was the most well-rounded kid in the world. It just so happened that I had blue hair, dark eye makeup. I was in a band, I skateboarded, and that equals bad kid in the eyes of a principal, despite her not even knowing me. And because I questioned authority a little bit, I was enemy number one. I mean, you had kids that were smoking dope under the bleachers. It's like, again, I'm against the war on drugs. And you had kids literally smoking under the bleachers, but heaven forbid, this little like blue-haired girl who listens to Sum 41 and Green Day and rides a skateboard to school, she's enemy number one. You've got cheerleaders and like star football athletes, smoking. We got to watch out for this kid who questions authority,
Exactly. So Sum 41 and Green Day, where was Paramore and Evanescence on the list?
Oh no, I
Because
definitely had those on my list, but like they weren't like up there. I mean, music definitely was a huge influence in like my politics as well growing up. So again, Green Day, and this is before, I mean, Green Day, I still listen to Green Day. I still like Green Day, I like Sum 41. Um, I listened to a lot of The Offspring, a lot of The Offspring. They definitely influenced me a lot when it came to being an anarchist. I also listened a lot to the Smiths, the Stone Roses, um, Joy Division, of course. I love Joy Division. But like I definitely think that people who influenced me politically were most were Green Day, Sum 41, and The Offspring, and bands like that. And of course, I was a skateboard kid and all this. Something about skateboard kids, we always tend to question the government. It's probably because they won't let us skate anywhere, honestly. I mean, California, I used to spend my summers down in Fort Lauderdale growing up, and there's a place down in Hollywood Beach where they won't let you skateboard, but they'll let you rollerblade, they'll let you bike, they'll let you do basically everything but skateboard. It's the most ridiculous thing in the world. But growing up, I was really big into skateboarding, and like police for some reason hated us. Like if you were a rollerblader, if you were a biker, it's like, okay, but if you were on a skateboard, police just assumed you were smoking weed or doing things you shouldn't be. It was the weirdest thing. So I think naturally, like kids who skateboarded just were like, yeah, F the government. They're just assuming things about us. I mean, you get me pulled aside. It's like I was a straight A student. All my teachers loved me because I was the only kid who would actually talk in class, especially my history and politics class. They used to love me for that. But as soon as I got the skateboard out, it was like, oh man, this old degenerate kid, And so I feel like that's what really inspires a lot of kids. Scott Horton was a skateboard kid. Tim Pool was although I sometimes question some things Tim Pool says. I would love to debate him. I mean, I have debated him on a few things, but I would love to just really go at it with him, honestly. But, he was a skateboard kid, and, he was huge during Occupy Wall Street. So, you've got these kids who are just, when you have a child who is literally doing nothing wrong but sitting on a board with wheels, and you've got people just dog on them for sitting on a board with wheels, yeah, you're going to have those kids question the government. On top of that, the music they listen to is questioning the government and, all sorts of things. So, it's no wonder we dye our hair blue and say crazy things and listen to crazy music because you won't leave us alone.
Exactly. It's like if you hate them in reality, it's much easier to hate them also in theory once you come across a theory. It's not like, well, you hear this theory, but you're like, oh, but the cops I know are so nice. And I know a lot of politicians who are very kind at these dinner parties.
Well, there are nice cops out there. There are nice cops out there, but it doesn't change the fact the system is trash. Yeah. There are nice cops out there. There are good. Here's the. I'm not going to be that good apple kind of person because there are good apples and bad apples. Doesn't change that the entire orchard is rigged. Doesn't change the entire orchard is diseased. Okay. When people tell me that blue lives matter, to me it is no different than people saying red coat lives matter. Can you imagine if our founding fathers, all these Trump people are like, oh, our founding fathers, this is like, yeah. If our founding fathers heard you say blue lives matter, they would be rolling, because that is no different than saying, oh, there are some good redcoats out there. Yeah, next thing you know, it's like, I did a whole video on this on the cops, honestly, where I made this exact same thing. You got some guy who's walking into the Green Dragon Tavern. He's like, guys, I met this one redcoat. His name's Paul. He's super nice, super swell. Him and I shared a pint together. Yeah, that guy was shot by Paul. Okay, that guy was shot by that redcoat that he was such good friends of. Because at the end of the day, those guys aren't going to care. If their government is telling them to shoot you down, they're going to shoot you down. Okay? Doesn't matter if the guy's a good cop, bad cop. He's not a good cop until he turns in his badge and says, I'm not going to do this. I am not going to listen to a government tell me to interfere on people's rights. And there are some cops out there who are turning in their badges as a result of COVID-19, which is great. But at the same time, you still got cops out there, like the ones in Australia, who are pushing people down and arresting them just for going outside.
Yeah, this is really difficult to deal with. As far as I promised him 10 reasons, so we got to get we got to get to 10 here. Oh, I came across a great article by Don Boudreaux. I think it's titled "Dumb Individuals, Brilliant Voters," where he says, we always hear about, well, we need a very large regulatory state because people are so dumb, and not only are they dumb, that they can't delegate, their expertise to someone else. Exactly.
To vote for someone to tell them what to do.
Exactly. So they're really dumb. They can't choose what products and services to buy. By the way, we need people to decide how the environment should be run through the EPA. We need them to choose how drugs are run with the Food and Drug Administration, and drugs are run. They need to regulate technology through the Security and Exchange Commissions along with the stock market. They need to know about all wars and all foreign policy and about all the sciences and physics, because they're going to vote on how schools are going to run. Well, obviously, if we're so dumb, then we can't do any of that stuff. So all of the criticisms applied tenfold to voting that they said occur in the free market.
Well, if voting actually mattered, if your vote actually did matter to be illegal, that's the thing. I think voting's a show. I think voting, when you walk into a voting booth, I think the president's already pre-planned. I think they let Donald Trump have at least one, go at it, have a good 4 years. Because here's the thing, you can't convince an entire population that the country is run by a dictatorship that needs to be taken over after 8 years of Obama. Now, smart people who lived under Obama, I'm not going to say smart people, informed people like myself who lived under Obama, I remember watching him in high school and being like, this guy's basically a celebrity. He's never in the White House. He's on Oprah. He's on Ellen. And that was my first red flag with Obama. And then the drone strikes happened. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, all my parents, all of my relatives who, marched against Vietnam were voting for him a second term after his drone strikes. I'm thinking to myself, you guys literally voted for this man to be anti-war. And you're voting for him to be for a second term? That's like what really struck me about Obama. But at the same time, the average person isn't going to know these things. They're not going to talk about these things. So you can't convince, after 8 years of Obama, that the country is run by an obvious dictatorship. So what do? You get this big billionaire from New York. You let him run for office. You let him say some kooky things. You twist his words through the media, and you let him win. You let him be president for 4 years, and you do nothing but bash him all day, every single day. And next thing you know, people are like, oh my gosh, we're run by a dictatorship. We're run by a Nazi, a racist, a bigot, a sexist. And so you basically have the entire population freak out over this guy, and allowing someone like Joe Biden to take office and basically saying, okay, we're going to let you tell us what to do. Oh, master, oh, government, oh, daddy government, tell us what to do because the last guy was crazy, so you must be better, right? That's exactly why they let Donald Trump win, so they can basically freak out the entire population, let someone like Joe Biden come in who's basically a puppet, who just is not there, is falling asleep, Because I don't think the president actually does make any decisions. I really don't. I think somebody else is ahead of everything. I think there's something much deeper and darker going on. I don't think us voting for a president actually does make any difference. I think everything's already pre-planned. I might sound like a tinfoil hat person right now, but I really don't. After 4 years of Donald Trump and loving Donald Trump and watching a man who said he was going to pardon Julian Assange and get us out of the wars, make a complete asshat of himself, I don't believe it. I don't think any of this matters anymore. I think it's all a show to make us think we have a choice when we don't. I also think it's a show to sort of make the blue tie people and the red tie people hate each other. Oh, you vote Democrat, you vote Republican, and it's like, guys. They're both awful. They're both terrible parties. You're both trash. I'm sorry. You're both run by warmongers and corporations, okay? You both suck. You guys walk into a voting booth every 4 years and think to yourself, who's going to tell me what to do next? Who's going to control my personal choices next? Let's see. Who's going to speak for me? I think Michael Malice says it best. Why do I want to walk into a voting booth and have somebody speak for me? No, I don't want that. I want to go move out into the forest and take care of my own life and leave me alone. That's it.
Well, of course, could you imagine if the president was actually making the decisions? I can just imagine Joe Biden up at like 3 a.m. Jill, I'm writing this law. Tell me if you like this line and how this sounds. I mean, it's not like they're there typing and then deleting and then going through this. It's written and then handed to them. Well, who writes it? Well, we don't even know. Of course, everything you see, you can hear about 10 years previously from the Trilateral Commission, Foreign Affairs. You can hear about it from all the white papers, people like Cass Sunstein and Richard Haas. I mean, Richard Haas talks about how he's friends with the guy from MI6 in Britain. This is the head of the Council on Foreign Relations, and how he's at a party. He's at a wedding one time and he gets an emergency call, and it's someone working for Barack Obama asking him whether or not we should bomb Syria because they, quote, crossed the red line with the gas attacks. He wrote about this in his book, World in Disarray. It's like, well, we never voted for him, or no one ever did, but it's almost good to just point that out and just let them know that's who's really running the show, not not these people. I mean, please, he's going to fix the war in Afghanistan. He's never studied Afghanistan formally in college. Please, he doesn't speak the language. How many times has he been there? Of course, the presidents don't run the show.
I also think it also has to do a lot with the banks, honestly, because every war you look at, every subsidy towards a corporation, every sort of downfall in America leads back to the banking system. I mean, look what happened in 2008. Look what's happening right now with these market crashes, with the money printer go burr. I think everything goes back to the banking system. I did a whole video on this where I talked about the history of Jekyll Island. You could go back to the year 1913 when the Federal Reserve Act was pushed. Woodrow Wilson, his chief officer, was there at Jekyll Island in 1910 with representatives from J.P. Morgan, with representatives of the Rockefellers. They were all there at Jekyll Island on a fake duck hunting trip under fake names. The public had no say in this whatsoever. They wrote up what was originally the Aldrich Plan, because Senator Aldrich was quite involved in it. Of course, his daughter was married to a Rockefeller. And they wrote this Aldrich Plan up, and they brought this forward to Congress, and Congress was like, yo, this is like a little sketchy. Like, your daughter's married to a Rockefeller. You're talking, you're getting involved with all these bankers and whatnot. This looks like it's going to actually hurt a lot of people. And Senator Aldrich's like, okay, yeah, whatever. Next thing you know, Woodrow Wilson is president, and his chief of staff was there at the island, hands this over to Woodrow Wilson, and within his first year, right before Christmas, the Federal Act Reserve is pushed. Within 3 years, an entire banking system, the control of all money, despite the negativity of the public, despite the negativity of Congress saying, yo, this is a little sketchy, we don't want this, gets pushed within 3 years, within 1 year of Woodrow Wilson's time in office. That's insane. And the fact that this is public information, like, you can look this up on Wikipedia, you can Google this. This is literally talked about at the resort. If you go to Jekyll Island Resort right now, they give you tours of the resort and like basically brag to you about how, yeah, we basically had a bunch of old rich white guys just sign up this whole thing and push it within 3 years, and now it's why your banking system sucks. It's why you basically get money stolen from you every single year. And this is public knowledge, and nobody's saying anything about it. Nobody's rioting in the streets. Like, we have riots in the street every year, and nobody goes after the Federal Reserve. Nobody goes after the Masonic buildings. No one ever goes after any of these places. Like, why? Why?
Yeah, even Ben Bernanke went there. I think it was in 2013 when Obama was president for the 100-year anniversary signing of the Federal Reserve. He went to Jekyll Island. There's a picture of him there. Frank Vanderlip wrote an article titled "From Farm Boy to Financier" in the Saturday Evening Post, and he was one of the guys at the meeting who more or less blew the whistle on the thing. So it's so funny. We always hear like, oh, you guys believe in these theories. Meanwhile, we have primary documents, and they have nothing but, I have a feeling it's in our best interest. No, that's a theory.
Well, the funny thing is, you mentioned that, is that when the Federal Reserve Act was being pushed, bankers were actually paying off journalists to talk badly about those who were questioning the Federal Reserve Act. So during this time, there was a huge movement in the West and the South, especially from farmers who were like, I think the country is run by elites. I think the country is run by the wealthy. So all the bankers went to journalists and basically shamed anyone who said this. Anyone who believed in the conspiracy theory that the country was run by the wealthy elite, they were a conspiracy theorist. They were a crazy person. They weren't meant to be trusted. So you got all of these farmers in the South and the West being called crazy conspiracy theorists by paid off journalists, when it turns out our country is run by wealthy elites. Like, who would have thought?
Unbelievable. That's actually another one of my main reasons for being a anarchist voluntarist, is because I always heard about how terrible the free market is because there could potentially be monopolies if all the customers choose to shop at the same place. And monopolies are terrible from the standpoint of consumers. But then they say, also, government should have a monopoly on money printing. They should have a monopoly on taxation. They should have a monopoly on compulsory education. They should have a monopoly on legislation and regulation. Well, What just happened to you saying that voluntary monopolies could potentially be evil, but coercive ones, not only are they okay, they're necessary. We need them. Well, no, all of your previous criticisms finally apply to something, and monopolizing the currency, I think, is one of the best examples we can come up with.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to run a small business? Well, let's tax you out of it. Oh, you have a large corporation? Well, here's ways you can actually exempt out taxes.
Exactly. Was there anything that you really, if there was a real fork in the road, you had to say, between going from being sort of a conservative or a minarchist and then becoming an anarchist, was there any defining thing that you would refer to as maybe a red pill moment?
Well, the thing is, most of my red pill moments, I think, would happen to me in high school. So when I was in high school, I was one of the youngest people to actually advocate for Ron Paul during his run for presidency. I think I was about 12, 13 years old when I, started pushing for Ron Paul. No, I think I was 16 years old. It was the second time Ron Paul was running. I was for Obama's second term, and Ron Paul was running. I was about 16 years old, and I was pushing for Ron Paul. But funny enough, before Ron Paul, before Occupy Wall Street, before Julian Assange, before Snowden, before Ross Ulbricht, this all happened in my high school career, by the way. So it's no wonder I got really involved in politics early on. I actually found Alex Jones when I was about 13 years old on a World of Warcraft forum. I was playing World of Warcraft nonsensely, and someone posted a video, and like, look at this crazy man, he's screaming about the police. And I'm like, okay. And so I clicked on the link, and there's Alex Jones talking about police brutality, talking about, it's the video where he's talking about like the guy with his mustache and the gold frame glasses. It's that video. And I remember thinking to myself, this guy's like me. He's angry. He's pissed off. I love this guy. I remember when I was like 13, 14 years old, that's like when I first started getting to skateboarding. And I'm like, yeah, I don't like the cops either. They tell me I can't skateboard. I like where this guy's coming from. So he's the one who introduced me to Bohemian Grove. He's the one who introduced me to a lot of the 9/11 stuff. I mean, I already kind of knew about 9/11 stuff growing up in Berkeley, California. I mean, I already was anti-Bush because my parents would take me to protests and whatnot. Again, my parents who voted for a second term of Obama took me to a Bush protest, mind you. So there's the irony there. But I just remember really loving Alex Jones and really liking what he had to say, and him just being angry about everything around him. And it really applied to me because I was an angry teenager at the time. I was really getting involved in this stuff. So, and it's because of him I knew about Occupy Wall Street. I remember, and you have to remember that when I was in high school, my parents were watching things like Fox News and CNN, and, it's like that was like old people news. I'm not going to watch Fox News and CNN. I'm not going to watch ABC News. I was on my computer constantly. And this is back when nobody was getting censored. So I'm watching Tim Pool in the middle of Occupy Wall Street, in the middle of the streets, getting chased down by cops. That's like on the street footage. That's what's happening in real time. I remember watching that and thinking, this is what's going on in the world. This is stuff the news isn't sharing with me. So that stuff was really beneficial to me growing up. And the fact that we're having a lot of censorship right now, and what I noticed during my time in college watching the Milo Yiannopoulos riots, I'm not the biggest fan of Milo, but I certainly still think he still had the right to speak. And I think smashing the windows of your own university, although to be fair, UC Berkeley is a real crock of poo, if you know what I'm saying. But I mean, I believe in the right to free speech. I believe in the right to really show what's out there in the world. Because the problem is what people don't realize, when you censor these quote unquote conspiracy theories, when you can censor this information, what you're doing is you're actually censoring a huge pile of information that other people could want access to. If you really cared about people not falling for conspiracy theories, not falling for false information, what you would do is allow that false information to be in the light and allow other people and encourage other people to research on their own terms and actually fact check that information themselves. But when you start censoring information, it makes people question, why aren't we allowed to talk about these certain things? Why can't we ask these certain questions? And you get other people who just are completely blinded to everything. Here's the thing. If this information was truly dangerous to the public, they wouldn't care. What they want is they want to censor information that's dangerous to them. If it really wasn't vital information that somehow puts the government and the elites as a threat, they wouldn't censor it. That's just a fact of life. The government doesn't care about false information. The government cares about information that does not influence them, that does not influence their benefit.
They're the main peddler of false information. I mean, they could just arrest Barack Obama. You said your main piece of legislation would consist of people, if they like their doctor, they'd be able to keep it. Between 6 and 9 million people lost that ability as a causal result of the ACA. You're going to jail. We government are here for accurate information. The hands behind your back. Don't move, Barack. Oh, he moved suddenly, so we shot him. That's never going to happen. He, of course, is just going to have an unmasked party while, Australia's enslaved and Gavin Newsom is pushing mandates back on the rest of us.
Well, that's the funny thing. I got a text from the ACLU just like a couple days ago asking me to fight against the recall of Gavin Newsom. Now, here's the thing. I think every single candidate that's running against Gavin Newsom, it's not going to change anything. I think no matter who's in office, it really doesn't change what the state wants. But I will say this, is that anyone who tells me not to recall any politician is a statist and therefore they're a terrorist. Like, look, I've been called a lot of things by the state before. I've been called a terrorist by the state, which I think is hilarious as somebody who grew up on watching V for Vendetta 1,000 times over. But at the end of the day, the only real terrorists are the ones who run this country. The only real terrorists are the ones who enforce government action, and the only real terrorists are the ones who basically try to tell me what to do with my own life. Those are terrorists. Those are the ones who are inflicting pain, causing violence amongst their own people, and really make a profit off of it. So yes, the person who is currently a president, he is a terrorist. My governor, he is a terrorist. And anyone who runs for office is a terrorist. I don't care if, and honestly, look, I'm a huge fan of the Mises Caucus, okay? But once you're in office, I'm going to tell anyone who runs under the Mises Caucus right now. I love the Mises Caucus. I like what they stand for. But the moment you become a politician or a influence of the government, I'm going to consider you a terrorist. I don't care if you're doing what I want you to. I don't care if you're saying what I want you to. You are officially a politician, therefore I can no longer trust you. And look, I know a lot of people who are running under the Libertarian campaign, but if we are true anarchists, we don't support that. We don't support people in government. I get people want to, I'm all for the Free State Project in New Hampshire. I actually want to move to New Hampshire sometime soon. But again, if you are running for office, I cannot trust you once you are in office. I'm putting that as a warning right now. And I don't care what people say about it. I know a lot of people in the Free State Project who want positions and power in the government. And I understand they have their hearts in the right place and the right mind. But once you are a government official, you are an enemy of me. Simple as that.
Excellent rule to have. As far as, of course, people with no institutional power, what are referred to as the January 6th rioters, they're called evil terrorists. Meanwhile, the governments invade countries based on lies and murder civilians, actual terrorism. And of course, if you try to print your own money, that's fraud, but the Federal Reserve can do it. If you try to steal, it's evil, but when they do it, it's called taxation. If you try to enslave, it's evil, but when they do it, it's called the draft or conscription. How do you think this moral double standard has been able to swindle hundreds of millions of people in a first world country?
I think it goes back to the beginning. When people talk about our founding fathers, it's like, yeah, great. Our founding fathers were some awesome people. They fought cops and they smoked their own marijuana plants and they talked about politics in bars. Great. Like, those are the guys who founded our country. But it doesn't change the fact that when they founded this country, they still put a lot of statist influence in it. I think we've been propagandized from the very beginning. When people who are Trump supporters, even Biden supporters or Bernie supporters or whatever, when they talk about how the mainstream media is suddenly out of nowhere, spreading propaganda. And when people, especially boomers, like, no offense to the boomers or anything. No, I know that's not true. I do mean offense to the boomers. You're the reason we're even worse than we were to begin with. I'm sorry, but the moment you vote for Barack Obama and Bush, like, I have some serious questions for you. The boomers and just overall boomer mindset of, remember when the media used to actually say the news? The media's never told us the news. The media has never told the truth. I don't care if it was the 70s, 60s, 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s, whatever. There were town criers in the middle of the Renaissance spreading propaganda for the king, okay? The news, the media has never told the truth. And I'm so sick of this boomer idea that things were better when you were a kid. In the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever. Yeah, great, the economy was better, the GDP was doing fine, but at the end of the day, you were still being propagandized, you were still being told what to do by the government, and you were still being controlled. And honestly, the majority of the happiness that boomers experienced growing up came from corporatism, came from this blind idea that was pushed through corporations and the media. They were being brainwashed to think they were living a happy life. And it's like, no, things didn't get better, okay? The curtain's just been lifted, okay? The curtain's just been lifted of what's really going on. And you're forced to watch it with us. You're forced to watch your own actions be in play. You voted for us to go over to Afghanistan. You pushed for a 20-year war. And this is directly at the boomers right now, the boomer generation. I want to lay attention to this right now. You pushed for a 20-year war in Afghanistan. You pushed for more war in the Middle East. You pushed for Obama. You pushed for this. You pushed for trillions of dollars in debt. You pushed for more war. You pushed for corporations to take over. You pushed for net neutrality. This is your fault. I mean, look, it's not completely the boomers' fault because, again, a lot of this propaganda and a lot of this dictatorship has gone from the very beginning. But boomers, specifically the boomer generation, pushed it so hard because they were living in their own little fantasy that they weren't paying attention enough. And now they're complaining that they have to see what their own actions have resulted in.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they have to watch what their own actions resulted in. They want to blame the millennials and the Generation Z for being too spoiled and too dumb. It's like, you pushed the propaganda on us. What generation raised us? What generation pushed us into this world? Now you have to watch the world burn.
Well, if, we're always hearing today about how it's important to, more or less do no thinking on your own and just listen to the experts. How many experts, told us in 2001, watch out, it's going to be a 20-year quagmire that's going to end up with the Taliban in power. The experts are never right about anything.
We built the Taliban. We built the Taliban by being there. The moment we walked into the Middle East, we basically built the Taliban. We pushed them out. We gave them enough time to basically build up more. When we took over Afghanistan, when we took over the Middle East, we basically dropped all sense of power all the powers that were in charge over there, basically putting us in charge. And next thing you know, the Taliban's building themselves. On top of that, we funded war weapons to them. We funded information. We were giving them information weapons as we were there. So we are the reason the Taliban is so powerful. We are to blame for everything wrong in the Middle East. The moment you interfere in another country's issues is the moment things go to shit. Look what happened with Vietnam. It's like, again, the boomers. The boomers are the ones who protested Vietnam, and then they pushed for the exact same thing in the Middle East. Because at the end of the day, we're stuck in a time warp. And it's my generation, the next generation, and it really sucks that the next generation is so, I mean, technically I am in Generation Z, I'm on the cuff. But the fact that Gen Z is so, the millennials are us too, so I can't really just blame Gen Z. The fact that my generation is so consumed by just consumerism and corporatism in the media is really terrifying to me, because I think what happened is in the early 2000s, the mid 2000s, and 2010s, my generation had a chance. We were actually opening our eyes to a lot of the issues going on. We had the music industry. The music industry wasn't completely destroyed from the inside yet. So we actually had bands telling us, the truth of things going on in the world. We actually had access to the internet that wasn't being censored. We actually watched on-the-ground footage of what was going on in the world. My generation had a chance, and next thing you know, Google takes over, and all the information we're taking in is being censored. So, of course, my generation is now more concerned with which Disney princess is the most sexist and which Harry Potter house they belong in. Of course, my generation is consumed by that because we went from taking in real-world information, because I remember when I was in high school, I actually feel like I was surrounded by people who were aware of what was going on in the world. What happened with the Boston bombing? What was going on with Julian Assange? What was going on with Snowden? I remember people actually asking real questions. Next thing you know, my first year of college rolls around, and our main news source is BuzzFeed.
Yeah.
My generation had a chance. And because of the internet being so censored and destroyed by pop culture nonsense, I'm telling you, I think they were onto it. I think they realized, oh crap, these kids are actually learning something. Censor everything.
Exactly. Is your YouTube channel backed up on Odyssey.com, by the way?
It's not yet. I am working on that.
Okay.
I talked to Lee from Free Talk Live Radio, and he's going to help me with that. Those guys are amazing, by the way. Please go support Free Talk Live. What they're going through right now is absolutely psychotic. I mean, it's just a perfect example of why the government is absolute trash. You know what happened with them, right? With the whole
they were kidnapped for trading cryptocurrency without a license. That's what Ernest
Imagine,
Hancock told
wasn't
me.
the whole point? Wasn't the whole? Oh, I love Ernest Hancock. He's a great guy. But you know what really just ticks me off with this whole crypto thing? Wasn't the whole point of crypto to get away from the licenses, to get away from the banks, to get away? That's the thing. Is we have something wonderful, right? Something that's our own, and the government comes in and they shit on it. Sorry, I'm cussing a lot. I just get really angry and talk about the government.
Bunch of criminals. Well, that's why I said make sure you're backed up on Odyssey, because you're going down real soon. So, by the way, I found someone who predicted this is the closest prediction I've come across. This was predicted in 2002. Of course, Scott Horton wrote an excellent book, Fool's Errand, saying this is a fool's errand. No matter what you do, you're not going to win. Taliban's going to take over. Ron Paul more or less was sympathetic to this idea. But the most accurate description came from Osama bin Laden in 2002. Here's what he said. If the Americans refuse to listen to our advice and the goodness, guidance, and righteousness that we call to them, then be aware that you will lose this crusade Bush began, just like the other previous crusades in which you were humiliated by the hands of the Mujahideen, fleeing to your home in great silence and disgrace. If the Americans do not respond, then their fate will be that of the Soviets who fled from Afghanistan to deal with their military defeat, political breakup, ideological downfall, and economic bankruptcy. From Jihad, bin Laden's own words, declarations, interviews, and speeches, 2002. Have you heard anyone come that close to predicting what just happened?
Brilliant. And you know what's funny is, again, the boomers, man, the freaking boomers. I have to trash on them because it's just, I talked to my parents about some of the things that are happening in the world, and they have no idea what's really going on, and they don't seem to care. It's funny how you get one generation of older people just think they know everything, and it's like, you voted for the chaos in the world. Do you not realize this? You look at what happened us going to war in 2003, right? It happened in 2003. I'm trying to get that right. 2003. We knew we weren't going to win. This was never a war about winning. This was never a war about oil. I have to keep reminding people we made business deals over oil with them. This was never about winning any war. This was never about terrorism. This was about putting the American people purposely in debt. Because when you have American people who are in debt, that means they owe the government something, which means they're going to conform to listening to the government, which means we're going to rely on the government, which means more power to the government. This was to purposely put American people in debt and put the American people in a lot of trouble. Pretty soon, with everything going on, there's going to be a homeless crisis. And you know who's buying up all the houses right now? The big banks. At the end of the day, this isn't about who's president. This isn't about who's governor. It's about the banking system. By the way, remember in like 2012, 2011, when Occupy Wall Street was happening, and everybody's, again, back to my generation being screwed over by censorship and being propagandized. We were all on the same page. We weren't thinking Republican versus Democrat. We weren't thinking left versus right, red hats and blue hats and whatnot. We remembered specifically the big banks are hurting people. The big banks are enemy number one. Let's go to the streets of New York, camp in the streets of New York. We were fighting cops. I mean, I was like 16 years old, ready to go camp in the middle of the streets of New York. Yeah, that my parents would love that. People were in New York fighting the police, rioting, really trying to send a message about what was going on with the big banks. This wasn't about what race you were, what religion you were. Again, political parties didn't matter at this point because we all recognized the big banks were hurting people. Next thing you know, within 2 years, we've got articles talking about which Disney princess is the most feminist, sexism amongst, Starbucks or something. The dumbest stuff, man. The dumbest, stupidest stuff. Okay, Black Lives Matter basically launched itself within 2 days in 2014. 2012, 2013, 2014 were the years of propaganda, of pushing propaganda to make people forget about the big banks. I'm telling you, remember when people were like throwing Molotov cocktails at Chase Bank in New York City, and the next year Chase Bank had a whole gay pride float in New York? What happened?
Yeah,
What happened?
they bought them off. They bought them off pretty quick.
It's like, yeah, we're causing constant economic devastation, but at least we love the gays, right?
Oh, totally. As far as finding what the real issue is with hating the banks, of course, you know, some people think it's the free market, some people think it's the state correctly. Here is my final reason that
Well,
this
banking
was
system's a private entity. It's actually not even part of the government. That's the funny thing. They have control. They have so many assets and control within the government, with war, with corporations. The big banks, right? The federal banking system has control of every single penny in this country, and they're basically in control of all the money within the government as well. And yet they're still a private entity. They're not public. So why does a literal corporation run all of the money within America, within the US?
Well, because the Federal Reserve Act granted them a monopoly, and if you try to use cryptocurrency without a license, the state kidnaps you. So, of course, it's the state picking their friends to violently enforce their rules on the rest of it. That's what fascism is. I mean, it's no different in principle, really, from socialism or communism. They both initiate violence.
That was a rhetoric question, but thank you for answering for the people who didn't know.
Well, you know, I was just avoiding the comments that I knew were going to be in the comment section.
Yeah.
So my final reason, and I want you to give any other reason that you thought led you to become an anarchist, was reading this passage in a book titled The Use and Abuse of Logic. He says, there's this terrible logical fallacy called unobtainable perfection. When arguments for and against courses of action are assessed, it is important to remember that the choice has to be made from available alternatives. All of them might be criticized for their imperfections, as might the status quo. Unless one of the options is perfect, the imperfections of the others are insufficient grounds for rejection. The fallacy of unobtainable perfection is committed when a lack of perfection is urged as a basis for rejection, even though none of the alternatives is perfect either. So from that, I got the question. There are a lot of criticisms of the free market, voluntary exchange. There's greed, corruption, terrible people. The problem is all of those apply to government tenfold because you can't opt out of funding government. So it's like greedy people who you can't opt out of funding. Is there any unique criticism of the free market that doesn't apply to government? And I thought about this for 2 months and then just became an anarchist afterwards. That is really my ultimate justification. Is there any other reason you cite for you becoming an anarchist?
I think it comes down to very many factors of life. I mean, obviously, I talked about like how I went through the whole phase as a teenager and how that really affected me, how the music affected me, how certain movies like V for Vendetta affected me, my experience with police officers growing up, my experience just over general with authority. I mean, I naturally rebelled against everything. I still naturally rebel against everything. In fact, I would even say I think I became a Trump supporter just to piss off my parents. Like, I wouldn't be, I mean, it only lasted 2 years of my lifetime. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I just didn't piss off my parents. I've never liked authority. I've never been like be told what to do with my life. And the fact that every single thing, you know, is just being documented and watched and it has to be licensed by, you know, these big people we're supposed to consider to be high and mighty, who we don't see, we don't know them, we don't know what's going on in the world, what they're doing with our money and our taxpayers' dollars. And I think it's a factor of I don't like being told what to do. I would just much like if you want to live your own life and go do some crazy, stupid stuff somewhere else, fine. I'm going to go live in the forest. I'm going to make jam, raise some goats, and watch out for my own family and community. I don't know why I can't do that. Why can't I just go mind my own business, take care of my community, take care of my family, and focus on my own community out there? The fact is, the fact is, if I were to go live out in the forest and just do that, live there peacefully with my own community and just not do anything else, that is considered a threat to the government. Me living peacefully in the forest, not paying taxes, living off my own land, taking care of my own community, is a threat to the government, because the government wants power over everything. They want to squeeze every piece of life, piece of money, whatever they can get out of me as a means of control, because they're just psychotic. They're sociopaths. Our whole government is run by sociopathic terrorists. And I stand by this. The fact that me is living out in the middle of the wilderness by my lonesome, making some babies, raising some goats, making some jam, that is considered a threat to the government. And to me, there is no better way than to rebel that way. So if I'm a threat to the government, and if the government wants to consider me a terrorist because I want to make jam in the forest, so be it.
Exactly. Yeah. I just want to clarify the ANCAP ANCOM disagreement, because there really is one. It's real quick. It's like two questions. So let me ask you. Let me ask you two things that ANCOMs can't answer that you, I'm sure, I certainly hope will be able to. All right. There is a woman looking for a roommate, and she chooses to discriminate against men because they're more likely to commit crime. Does this woman have a right to discriminate against all men because she's just kind of terrified, or actually she doesn't even want to tell you, she's just going to do it? Is she morally justified in doing that?
I mean, I don't personally want to justify it, but yeah, sure, why not? If she only wants to live with women, that's her own business.
Thank you. All right. One tally in the correct direction. Okay.
All right, keep going.
I want to work for Ernest Hancock, but Ernest, he doesn't like me too much. He says, Keith, work around the house, and in exchange, I'll give you, I don't know, $20. So I end up working there, and he's able to reap $100 off the radio broadcasting system that I set up for him, and he only pays me $20. Am I morally justified in making this voluntary transaction where he makes $100 and I make $20?
Well, yeah, you're making a voluntary transaction.
And that is why you are not an anarcho-communist, because you understand people have the right to contract.
Well, I
mean, look, internships, an internship is justified. You spending years researching without getting paid is justified. It's all about the voluntarism, not about the surplus labor theory of value exploitation nonsense.
Well, if we're going to go into further that, you can't necessarily be an anarcho-communist, because in order for communism to have any sort of sense of working, you have to have some sense of government. You have to have some sense of governance. So once you put communist there, you can't really have anarcho to back it up.
Exactly. Yeah. You can't say there should be no rulers. Also, you people don't have the right to voluntary contract. But then you're the ruler.
The reason I don't call myself an anarcho-capitalist, because calling myself an anarcho-capitalist implies that someone can, in fact, be an anarcho-communist, which someone cannot be. It does not logically make sense. So I refuse to call myself an anarcho-capitalist, because it signifies that you can be an anarcho-communist when you can't.
Excellent principle to have. Ashton Birdie, thanks so much for your time. Links to Ashton's Instagram and YouTube. And you better get that Odyssey channel up and running, because you're going to be finished. You're done.
I'm going to be banned pretty soon.
I was shocked to even find any of your stuff on YouTube. Ashton, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.